In November of 2024, Calgary saw an increase of 47.9% in the number of homes that sold over $1 million compared to November 2023. 47.9%. Now, as Calgary and surrounding cities and towns continue to lead the country in the luxury market, according to multiple studies, it's time we start paying attention to this market specifically. So we are going to be starting a second monthly market update focusing on Calgary's luxury market, homes over $1 million, including surrounding acreages, towns, and including Canmore as well. Since this is the first of many updates to come, please let me know in the comments if there are specific areas you'd like me to focus on or data you'd like me to try to analyze, and I'll do my best to include it. So put it in the comments and let's jump into what we've found so far in this luxury market. So in our first chart, looks like a beautiful little Christmas tree. Maybe we'll change the colors for the new year, but you can see here right now. So I pulled this data. All this data was pulled December 1st on the Sunday. And so right now you end up having, and I'll talk about all the areas for the most part, but Calgary has 43 properties that are pending that are over $1 million. They have 518 properties that are active and 145 properties that are currently sold in the last month. So in November. Now, Airdrie, they have 0 places that are pending. Airdrie has 7 actives and 3 sales last month. Bray Creek, so if you know where Bray Creek is, a beautiful area. They have 1 pending, 6 actives, and 2 sales. Canmore, they actually have 3 places pending right now, 84 places on the market, and 18 sales last month. And you can kind of read the stats here. So if you want to get into it and dig into it a little bit deeper, you can pause it, you can kind of see, but we have all the numbers for Cochrane Lake, Conrich, which is a little tiny area, DeWinton, which is south of the city, Heritage Point, which is also south of the city, Okotoks, Pritis Greens. They are separate, but almost the same. And rural Foothills and Rocky View County. So Foothills is south of the city and Rocky View County is north of the city and kind of wraps around. So today we're specifically going to talk about Calgary, Canmore, and the 2 districts of Foothills and Rocky View. But first, here are all the months of inventory for these areas. If the areas are blank and they have 0 numbers because there was no sales last month. But what stands out to me is this lovely little high number right here, Cochrane. So Cochrane right now for homes over $1 million has 7 months of inventory. And the reason being is because it only had 1 sale and 7 actives, right? So nothing pending right now. So that's going to give you 7 months of inventory. Canmore is sitting at 4.8, Calgary's at 3.9, Bray Creek's at 3.5, Airdrie 2.3. Rocky View County, so the big acreages between Foothills are sitting at 4 and 5 months of inventory. Pritis, also kind of acreage area, sitting at 4, and Heritage Point is sitting at 3. So the only one that is really strong buyer's market, to be honest, is Cochrane. Everything else, ideally right around this 4-month mark kind of range. Now, I know in higher luxury properties, specifically, let's say like acreages, when you get into the higher price point, your pool of buyers is smaller. I get it. And so sometimes in a normal market, when the city was sitting at like, let's say 5, 4, 5, 6 months of inventory, it was very easy to see 12, 14 months of inventory for some of these product types. So the fact that we are seeing anywhere between 3 to 7 months of inventory, that to me says that we are really kind of in a balanced market for the most part for a lot of these areas. But let's dive into the further numbers. So when you want to look at the median sale price as of last month, here is what you can look at. The highest ones are actually Bray Creek and Rocky View County, both over 1.6 million. You've got Foothills sitting at 1.3, Pritis, Okotoks, they're kind of at 1.2 and $1 million. Heritage Point is sitting at about 1.4 million. Cochrane, for the sales that have happened, was sitting at $1 million, $1,085,000. Canmore is sitting at 1.4, Calgary is at 1.2, and Airdrie is at 1.3. So a lot of these areas outside of Calgary, Canmore, and the 2 counties, they have a lot, like don't have a ton of data. So we have to kind of play this with, be careful with this data because it can jump and move around quite a bit when you only have like 1 or 2 sales each month. It's good to understand what median prices are, but it's also good to understand a little bit about price per square foot. Now, a lot of these do include acreages, and we'll get into that and talk about how much price per acre or where it's all kind of landing on a chart. But right now, you just say Bragg Creek and Rocky View County are the most expensive, sitting at 1.6 each, right? Well, if you actually look at the price per square foot, it's actually Canmore. Canmore is sitting at $824 per square foot. The next one, and I found this one surprising actually, was Airdrie, and it's sitting at $717 per square foot for homes over $1 million. And then you're looking at Foothills County and Rocky View County, both right around $600, which is also Bragg Creek. And then you have Calgary sitting at $550, and then everything else is below that. And so the one that kind of stood out to me that was a little bit interesting was Airdrie, just because I just wasn't expecting it. And I'm sure you weren't either, but that's what it got. So here's all the numbers. I'll let you pause the video if you want to watch it. I'm going to keep moving on. So let's talk about the Calgary market. So we had to play with these charts, and I am not a statistician. I can't even say the word. I enjoy stats. They tell stories, but I don't have like the math background to pull stats together. So I'm doing the best that I can. So if you have some insights on how I could pull the data better, I'm all ears. Just comment below. If you want to set up a call, you have ideas, you want to send me some information, I'm all games. I'm all ears. But in here, what I did, instead of just looking at the median sale price for each month, because it was really up and down and jumping all over, because again, the data is all over, because you're dealing with sometimes properties that are selling for 6 million and then 1 million, and it just really skews those numbers. So what I did is I did a 3-month average of the median price. Okay, so you're going to see the actual price is starting here 3 months into last year, and then it's a 3-month rolling average, and then it's of the median sale price. So I think this kind of smoothed it out a bit. It gave a little bit of clarity, and then we have a trend line as well for both the number of sales as well as the values. Okay, so when we're looking at this, what I find really fascinating is this trend line for the number of sales in Calgary. You can clearly see that there is a trend of increase in number of properties that are selling over $1 million. And this alone is actually the reason that I wanted to do this market update, is because there are more and more homes that are selling for over $1 million as our values have increased in our city. And I truly believe we're gonna see more and more properties like this, whether they're being built or they're just starting to transact, it's gonna happen. So we wanna be a resource for you, for those that are kind of looking over $1 million. But last month, we had 145 sales, where prior in the year, a year ago, I should say, we had 98 sales in the city. So that's where we saw, I think it's 46 or 45% or so increase year over year with that number. Even some of these numbers over this past year, I mean, if we were doing this every month, we would have seen these numbers, but we haven't. So I'm going to share them with you, because there was 4 months here where we actually had over 200 sales. So it was that for March, April, May, and June. So this spring, each month, there was over 200 properties that sold that were over $1 million in Calgary. I mean, I'm born and raised. I remember when prices were much different, decades ago, literally. And to me, this is pretty wild. This is pretty crazy to see these types of numbers. That same time frame last year, there was between 130 to 185 sales, where now we were seeing 202 up to 260 sales in a month. So that's a big change, and that's changing our market with what we're looking at. Now, if you want to look at square footage tied with the sale price, you can definitely see there are a lot of outliers and kind of groupings, especially this guy. So about let's call it 2,800 square foot property sold for like maybe 3.4 in the last month. But majority of the sales are kind of between, let's say 1,500. So you're gonna have more bungalows, most likely in that range, tied within this 2,000 to 3,000 square foot range. upwards of, let's call it 1.8, 1.7. So this to me is kind of the main area, price range and square footage of what's selling over $1 million. Now, definitely there's places over 2 million that have, the square footage that is similar, but then you're getting into some of these 4,000 square foot properties selling for around $2 million as well, even some for about 2.5. So I hope you find this interesting. I find it fascinating to be able to see all of this stats out here. Now, what I found really neat is to kind of look and say, what kind of property type were they? Well, mainly detached properties. As you can see, all of those stats that we were looking at, pretty much detached. You can kind of start seeing some row townhomes. You can see some semi-detached properties in there. But visually, this is kind of where they all fall. Now, what I find very fascinating, I don't think I've ever seen anyone have a chart like this. What neighborhoods are they from? So that big house that sold for over $3 million was in Lake Bonavista. We have some places that are the larger square footage properties, Aspenwoods, Dalhousie. Now that is fascinating to me to see that property there, or that neighborhood there, and I'll explain in a second. Patterson, West Hillhurst, Bankview, Mahogany, that makes sense, Altadore, Willow Park, Briar Hill. And then you've got a whole bunch in here from Richmond to Killarney to Springbank Hill to lots of Altadores, Garrison Woods, all that kind of stuff. Now, the reason I find Dalhousie really fascinating is in a recent video, we actually were talking about 9 neighborhoods that you could move up to, right? So what are some great neighborhoods you could move up into in the city? Came up with 9, and one of them was Dalhousie. Now, what's happening in Dalhousie that I find interesting is it is a great neighborhood to find a cheaper lot compared to like your Altadores or your Trywoods like Brentwood, Charleswood, Collingwood, and build a bigger house. And this is probably, well, it is because it's over 4,000 square feet that sold for maybe like 1.8. And so we are seeing that happening in a lot of these kind of semi-established or really more established neighborhoods like a Varsity, Dalhousie. If you go down south, maybe not in Southwood, but in areas that are close to Southwood around there, you can start seeing this transition happening. And so if you were in a position where you're like, you know what, I'd love to buy a property and actually build on it for my home versus waiting for something, well, there could be opportunities. And the fact that Dalhousie is on here, it just kind of surprises me. So anywho, that's a little interesting side note. Now, if we look at the 30-day months of inventory, based on price ranges, what is happening? So if you have a budget of 1.8 and you're kind of wondering what's happening, well, I can tell you. So I'm not going to go through all of them, but as you can clearly see, anything below 1.3 million, so which would be right here, I believe. Yeah, 1.3 million. You can see that there's a lot more active properties than there are in other price points. Now, when you get to 2 to 2.5 million, it jumps up again for a lot of inventory. And then that 2.5 to 3, where it's got 26 active properties, but 0 sales. The 2 to 2.5 million has 8 sales last month. And these ranges between 1 to 1.3 combined, what is that? 3, 6, 90. So let's call it roughly 100 sales over the last month. Now, anything under 1.4 months of inventory is sitting, let's call it 1.2 months of inventory up to 2.8. So again, remember, anything between 2.5 and 4 is a balanced market. Anything under that is in a seller's market. So seller's market for basically properties under 1.4, between 1 million to 1.4. And then when you get to 1.4 or over, that's where it shifts a little bit. All of a sudden you start seeing 5 months of inventory, 5.25, 6 months, 9 months, 6 months. And then if you're at 3 to 3.5, you're sitting at 14 months of inventory. So it's kind of an interesting stat depending on your price range, right? If you're looking at homes that are in between the 2 to 3 million price range, know that you're sitting at a 6.8 months of inventory. So things are sitting longer. There's going to be more options in the lower budget price range. It's not lower, but you're between your 2 to 2.5 versus 2.5 to 3. So there's gonna be more options there for you. And there's also more sales in there for you. So I mean, when you're spending this kind of money, you want to make sure there's a market for it in the future too. And as prices increase in the city, as more people move here, as there's more money in the city, all those things are shifting and changing. Definitely buying in the right price range for you and your family to live in, but also to make sure there's resaleability is really, really important. And that's something we can help you with. All right, let's talk about Canmore. So in Canmore, we can see the prices are all ranging over those months, are ranging between 1.3 to 1.7 kind of range. Now, again, this is not super accurate information because we're just pulling median prices, and this is a 3-month rolling average. But what you can see is, unlike Calgary, they are very steady on the number of sales over $1 million. Last month, I should say, there was 18, and last year there was 9. So it's double, but if you look at October, there was 20, and October 2023, there was 20 as well. So Canmore is one of those places where they're not able to build more land because they're in the mountains and you're kind of stuck there. So what's gonna happen is definitely values are going to stay high. They're going to stay increased because it's just one of those places post-COVID that people are going to visit again. And really, once international buyers can purchase again, Canmore is one of those places you definitely could see more people buying in from out of country. Now, if you want to look at what Canmore looks like for the square footage tied to the price, you can kind of see a kind of cluster right in here. That's going to be your main type of product. Is going to be between the 1.2 up to maybe 1.6, kind of your, let's call it 1,200 square foot to about 2,100 square foot properties. Now, a lot of these are going to be townhomes, attached properties, that type of thing. There are a few detached properties in here, but you can definitely see there's more townhome, and some semi-detached properties in that price range. And when you get into some of the higher price stuff, I mean, you've got a semi-detached for 2.2 that sold, you got a detached that sold over 2.2. And then some of these, that's a really big townhome, 28 probably 100 square feet, and then a detached property that was almost 3,000 square feet that sold for about 1.6 to 1.8. Now, where a lot of these are located, a lot of those townhomes are going to be located in places like the Three Sisters. So you can see that a lot of them are in Cougar Creek. And when you get into some of the bigger places like Eagle Terrace, Hospital Hill, beautiful areas for you to consider if Canmore is what you're looking at. Now, what about the months of inventory there? So if you are looking at properties between $1 million to 1.1, you're sitting at barely into a balanced market. Now, if you jump from 1.1 to 1.2, all of a sudden you're in a buyer's market, and it's all just based on how many sales happened last month compared to how many are active. Now, the rest of these between, 1.2 up to 1.7 is kind of sitting in that balance market, kind of into a seller's market a little bit, barely. And then once you get over 1.9, again, you're back into that buyer's market. So it all just really depends on how many sales. If you have low sales, high inventory, that could really quickly change the number. But all of a sudden you have 2 or 3 sales that happen in that price range, then that can really skew it again and bring it back down into more of a seller's market. Because you're dealing with lower inventory numbers, it can get pushed around a lot easier. So what does it look like in Rocky View County? So this is going to be including more acreage properties around the city. And so as you can see, last month we had 24 sales in Rocky View County. And I know we've shown a map already, but you can see on the map where Rocky View is. Last year we had 23. Last month we had 31, where last year was 16 in October. So there's a slight increase. Like if you look at the gap here to the gap here, it's a slight increase in numbers. It's not like what we're seeing in Calgary. So again, acreages usually have been for the last number of years $1 million or more type property. It's very, very rare you're going to find acreages where you're going to say, hey, I'm going to go buy, within, half an hour of the city and find something for $600,000, $500,000 with a lot of acres, a really nice house, and you can just drive to the city within 20 minutes. That's just not really a thing. And so when you look at the square footage, because again, these will have acres attached to them, a little bit different. A lot of the properties are going to be under, let's say 1.5, and they're kind of under 3,000 square feet. So between, let's call it 1,800 to 3,000 square feet. And a lot of them obviously are going to be detached properties because it's very hard to build a single townhome on an acreage. And some of these, you can see some of the areas, but some of them are like Harmony, Montera. What do we got in here? Elbow Valley, Bears Paw. Some of these ones that say none, just so you know, they're more like acreages. They're not attached to an area. But then you have some outliers, right? You have Bears Paw, you got West Ridge, you got Conrich Meadows, Elbow Valley, Watermark, Glenmore. So there's West Bluff over here sitting at 3.5. So you have some beautiful areas and some gorgeous acreages. Now, what does it look like for price per square foot, or price per acre, I should say? So usually a lot of the places, I'm just kind of looking at the data, a lot of the places here are under 5 acres. So as you can see, this is the 5 acre mark, and a lot of them are under 5 acres. So these are more just kind of hobby acreages. You're not really going to have a full-on farm in there. I mean, you have a few places that are selling with over 10 acres, but typically your 5 acres are under. And mainly you're looking at probably this kind of price range, 2.2 all the way down to $1 million. So this is going to be your main area of where you are seeing these types of properties selling. Now, if we look at Rocky View County, again, if we're looking at these price ranges of $1 million to $2 million, anything up to $2 million, which is right here, on the lower price end of those things, I mean, we actually have 0.8 months of inventory between 1.2 to 1.3, which is ridiculously fast for acreages. You have 1 month for 1 million to 1.1, and you got 5 months, you got 2.3 months, and then you got 8 months. So as you cross over that 1.4, 1.5, the market slows down for acreages in Rocky View County. And as you get over that 2 million mark, you are sitting at 3.3, but then you go 7.5, 4.5. So you can see how it fluctuates so much. But definitely in the lower price ranges, acreages, according to this, are moving really, really quick. So now let's look at Foothills County. So it's just south of the city, and it's a bunch of acreages areas out that way. So again, if you look at the gap between here, it's slightly increasing. The trend is slightly going up. We had 15 sales last month. We had 9 sales last year, where we had 12 in October and 11 in October 2023. Now, if you look at all the sales here, you have one real outlier this way, but there's actually, it's a really tight cluster, and from like basically $1 million to 2 million, anywhere from 1,000 square feet to 3,000 square feet. So it's actually quite tight compared to the other places. And again, because of so many acreages, you're just going to see none for a lot of the areas, but you do have a few from DeWinton, Mountain View Estates, that kind of thing. And again, a lot of detached properties. And for actual acreages, a lot of them are a lot bigger. So here, if that's 25, that's going to be about 12, so 10. So this is probably going to be about your 15 acre mark. Majority of the places are under 10 or 15 acres in the sales that have happened, where this one that sold for, I'm assuming that's probably high 4.8 maybe million. It was like 110 acres maybe. So that's a really big acreage, which you can see, which is right here, that 4.5 to 5 million, which is a 2 month of inventory. Only 2 other places for sale that are in that price range right now. But anything under $2 million in the Foothills County is actually pretty much in a seller's market, which is very, very interesting. As soon as you break that $2 million mark between 2 to 2.5, there are a lot of active places, I think about 12 or 13, and only 1 sale last month. So if you have a property in that area and you're priced at like 2.3, it could be a really, really slow market compared to a home that's at 1.8. So that's just what the numbers show, and that's what it looks like. So what you can expect in that kind of market. So that was a lot of talking, a lot of data, a lot of information, and I hope you found value in it. If you have any other thoughts on what we can pull, areas we can focus on as we continue doing a luxury market report, if you need help from us in any way, put comments down, reach out to us at info@chamberlaingroup.ca, and we would love to help you with your luxury home here in Calgary or the surrounding areas. And if you have any questions, just let us know. Hope this video is great. If you need more information on more data, go up here where you can see this month's Calgary real estate market update with all of the data there.